You don't need bars to be a prisoner. Just sign a 30-year mortgage and call it the American dream. You'll fall asleep every night inside a house that technically belongs to the bank. They told you freedom meant making your own choices. But what if those choices were already written for you by loan agreements, payment schedules, and rising interest rates? What if your so-called milestones, home ownership, the degree, the car in the driveway, were just well-disguised shackles? Look at the numbers. As of 2024, 77% of American adults are in debt. That's not a random statistic. That's a nation where nearly everyone owes something to someone. A society quietly run on "I owe us." We're told it's normal, expected, even responsible. But maybe it's more than just economics. Maybe it's a form of obedience. Friedrich Nietzsche didn't just see this coming. He explained how we got here. In the genealogy of morals, he made a chilling observation. Guilt, the moral backbone of modern society, was born out of debt. Think about that. He wasn't talking about dollars. He was talking about the way punishment was invented not to control behavior, but to make sure people remembered what they owed. To make memories stick, early societies invented pain. Nietzsche said to breed an animal with the right to make promises. Humans had to develop memory. And to make sure they didn't forget their debts, they had to feel pain. It wasn't about justice. It was about control. And here's the twist that most people miss. In German, the word for guilt is the same word for debt. Schuld. So, your guilt about falling behind on bills, your anxiety about not measuring up financially, that's not just emotional, it's engineered. You've been taught to carry your debt, not just in your wallet, but in your conscience. Like it's a personal flaw. Like you failed, not the system. But that's the trap. If you think debt is only about money, then you've already missed the point. It's not just about repayment, it's about power, about obedience, about shaping who you are and what you value. The system doesn't just want your money, it wants your silence, your loyalty, your belief that being in debt makes you moral if you keep paying. You think you're free because you chose your major, or bought your house, or signed those papers. But those weren't real choices. They were just steps in a script handed to you by a culture that defines success through suffering. This is the first layer of the trap. Consent disguised as responsibility. You're not forced to obey. You're convinced to. And the genius of it? It doesn't need to hurt you. It convinces you to hurt yourself. Every time you skip joy because you can't afford it. Every time you stay in a job you hate just to make payments, you're enforcing your own prison sentence. Not with violence, with virtue. And it goes deeper. Because once you believe the debt equals moral failure, they've won. You won't fight. You'll repent. You won't question the rules. You'll just feel guilty for breaking them. You'll think that being in debt is your fault, that you're lazy, irresponsible, that if only you worked harder, stayed more disciplined, budgeted better, you'd be fine. You won't blame the machine. You'll blame yourself. But what if everything you've been taught about debt is a lie? What if the shame you carry doesn't belong to you? What if the debt isn't your failure, but their design? If you still believe this is just about money, then you've missed the bigger picture. This isn't a financial system. It's moral engineering, a system that teaches you to obey by wrapping your suffering in virtue. And Nietzsche saw this coming. He called it the aesthetic ideal, the dangerous belief that suffering is noble, that pain makes you good, that hardship is proof of your worth. Under this spell, debt becomes a kind of twisted rite of passage. You're praised for working 3 jobs, admired for sacrificing your health, your youth, your time. But ask yourself, praised by who and for what? Why do we glorify young people drowning in student loans and call it an investment in their future? Why do we clap for people still paying off their homes 30 years later like it's a badge of honor? Why do we worship the grind even when it breaks people? Because it's no longer about economics. It's a cultural religion. Debt has become sacred, and repayment is its ritual. The more you suffer in silence, the more you're seen as responsible. But Nietzsche warned us, modern morality didn't evolve from kindness. It came from punishment, from the need to make people remember what they owed. And over time, that punishment stopped coming from the outside. It was internalized. We did it to ourselves. Guilt wasn't about justice anymore. It became a personality trait. That's how obedience was born. Today you don't need chains or public floggings. You just need a bill you can't pay, a loan you can't escape, and a credit score that reminds you you're never doing enough. So, is that morality or is that manipulation? Because this is where power hides in plain sight. It doesn't look like tyranny. It looks like responsibility. It doesn't tell you to submit. It praises you for being mature, for working hard, for staying on the path, even if that path is bleeding you dry. And what does the system ask in return? That you have faith, not in God, in credit. That if you keep grinding, sacrificing, obeying, someday freedom will come. That's the lie. Nietzsche would ask, who told you that freedom is earned through obedience? Who gains from your suffering? Who profits from your patience? Because this system doesn't just want your effort. It wants your belief. It wants you to see struggle as noble. It wants you to wear your exhaustion like a crown. But the truth is, you're not being responsible. You're being ruled. You thought you were making smart choices. In reality, you've been conditioned to serve, without ever being told that's what you're doing. You think you're climbing the ladder? Whose ladder? Built by who? Funded by what? Because in today's economy, debt is the new chain. It doesn't matter if you live in a house or drive a nice car, if every moment of your life is being rented from a lender. That's not freedom. That's just modernized control. Ray Dalio's debt cycle explains how the system is engineered. Credit is pumped into the economy to make everything look prosperous. People borrow, buy, consume. But when the time comes to repay, the money flows upward. The wealth you thought you were building, it was always moving, just not in your direction. As of 2023, the top 0.1% of Americans hold more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. That's not capitalism. That's extraction. That's feudalism with a better logo. The peasants don't farm land anymore. They service interest. And the kings? They don't wear crowns. They wear suits. Nietzsche warned us. Those in power create the values that justify their power. And they've done exactly that. They've sanctified debt. They've made obedience look noble. They've made you believe that financial servitude is adulting. But you're not maturing. You're being harvested. Because the truth is, you're most useful not when you're broke and not when you're rich, but when you're repaying. When you're just comfortable enough to keep going, but never free enough to stop. That's the sweet spot. That's when they win. The system doesn't want your collapse. It wants your compliance. You are a living yield, a return on investment. Your energy, your focus, your youth, it's all being monetized day by day. And you've been taught to see this as normal, even noble. This is the modern slavery Nietzsche never saw coming, the voluntary kind, the kind where you choose the cage, where you defend it, where you proudly wear your student loans and mortgage like they're signs of maturity, where you believe the only path to security is through lifelong repayment. But maybe security is just a rebranded word for dependence. And here's the most terrifying truth. Your belief is the system. Your faith in its rules, your guilt for falling short, your silence when it hurts. That's the fuel. Break that belief, and the whole thing starts to crack. So ask yourself, do you own your debt, or does your debt own you? Because until you answer that honestly, the game keeps playing you. Nietzsche called this moral slavery. And he didn't hate it because it was enforced from above. He hated it because it was worshipped from below. Because modern man doesn't just obey, he glorifies obedience. He calls it being a provider, a responsible adult, a productive citizen. But look around. As of 2024, over 60% of American retirees are still in debt. After a lifetime of doing it right, they're still trapped. That's not a glitch. That's the blueprint. The system was never built to set you free. It was built to keep you working, just long enough to stay hopeful, never long enough to breathe. But Nietzsche also gave us a way out. He called it self-overcoming, not rebellion, not war, but the radical act of rewriting your own script, of seeing through the illusion and choosing something different. You don't have to burn the whole thing down. You just have to stop believing in it. That's the real exit. The moment you stop playing by their rules is the moment you start writing your own. You stop measuring success by credit scores and social approval. You stop seeing suffering as a virtue. You stop waiting for permission to live. You reclaim your values. You stop serving the machine and start building your own path. That's what Nietzsche's Übermensch really is. Not a ruler over others, but someone who rules himself, who breaks the script, who defines meaning instead of inheriting it. And it's not about walking away from responsibility. It's about choosing the responsibilities that belong to you, not the ones sold to you by banks, media, or tradition. So, what does that look like? It starts with clarity. Learn how the system works. Read the fine print. That 30-year mortgage at 6% doesn't cost $250,000. It costs nearly double. They count on you not knowing that. Then, start building assets that can't be taken. Skills, ownership, autonomy, a business, a craft, a service only you can deliver. Something that belongs to you completely. Live simply. Not because you're poor, but because you're sovereign. Simplicity isn't sacrifice. It's strength. It means you can walk away. You don't need what they're selling, and when you don't need their approval, you stop being easy to control. This is the real revolution, not in the streets, but in the mind. Want tools for the journey? Start with Debt, The First 5,000 Years by David Graeber, or Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin. These books don't just change how you view money, they change how you view yourself. Because here's the final truth. You owe the system nothing. Not your time, not your obedience, not your soul. But you do owe someone something. You owe yourself your life back. Not a life of quiet desperation dressed up as success. Not a life defined by sacrifice for someone else's gain. But a life that is yours. A life where you're no longer enslaved by a silent contract you never signed consciously. So, stop asking how to win a rigged game. Ask how to walk away from it. The cage was never locked. It was just disguised as a reward. Break the illusion, and there's nothing holding you. You don't need permission. You don't need approval. And you certainly don't need debt to feel worthy. You just need to wake up. And if this message woke something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this with 10 people who still think the cage is a castle. And comment below. What part of the illusion did you finally see through? Because these aren't just comments. They're evidence that we are waking up, that we are not alone, and if you want more fire, more clarity, more truth, subscribe, not out of habit, but because you're choosing to stay awake. Remember, the system only works as long as you believe in it. Once you don't, no one can ever cage you again.